Hi. In the second part of the lecture, still, we're going to talk about the Philippines. But before we move on to the different characteristics and common traits of the Filipinos, I would just like to give first a very short review about the Philippines to see how much you learn about my country. So I keep on telling you again and again, one of the reasons why we would like you to know about the Philippines is for you to gain knowledge on the various information that you can learn about my country. Because who knows, in the future, you could probably come here in the Philippines and teach some Filipino students. And for that, it is actually a very big reason for you to learn more about the Filipinos so that you can easily understand on why they act that way, on why they behave that way, so that you can have a very deep understanding of your Filipino students. And not only that, in a multicultural classroom, there could also be a possibility that you could probably handle a Filipino student from a multicultural family. Okay, so let's have a very brief review about the Philippines. Let's see how much you remember. Okay, now the Philippines is an archipelago having some blank islands located in Southeast Asia. Can you still remember how many islands we still have? Okay, think about it. Let's see. The answer is yes, you're right. It is 7,107 islands, but this one is only during low tide. Therefore, if it is high tide, we actually have another number of islands in the archipelago. And by the way, when we say archipelago, it is a group of islands surrounded by water. As you can see from the Philippine map, there are actually different islands which is composed by different land masses here in the Philippines. So many islands scattered around the oceans, okay, in my country. Next question. Okay. Oh, this is, by the way, the information that I would like you to know when it comes to the number of the islands in the Philippines during high tide and during low tide. Okay. Next one. The Philippines consists of three major island groups, namely, what are those three island groups that I talked about? Three main island groups. Out of the 7,107 islands, the three main islands are Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. You're correct. So the answer is actually the first one, letter A. Now, Luzon, as I have mentioned in the first part, is the northernmost island in the Philippines, and it is the largest and the most populated island. The second one is Visayas. We also call this one as a Visayan island. Is the one in the middle, which consists of several islands and several smaller islands. It is actually where Cebu, Bohol, and Boracay is located. Those are very famous tourist attractions or hotspots in the Philippines. The third place is the third or the second largest island in the Philippines is Mindanao, and it is actually located at the southern part of the archipelago. And as I have told in my first part of the lecture, most actually of the people living here are usually Islam because, of course, of the country surrounding it. It is actually near Malaysia and Indonesia. As a result, it is actually also influenced the religion of the people living in the southern area. Okay, now the difference actually of the quality of education in these three main islands can actually be easily observed. I'm going to discuss that one deeply if we talk about the Philippine education system. Okay, so these are the different islands that we have here in my country: Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. I hope you will not forget these places. Okay, next question. So the Philippines is divided into how many regions? By the way, when we say region, what does that mean? When we say region, it is actually the division or district for local governance. The farther the place or region is, actually, I cannot say this, but the quality of education is actually a little bit different. Okay, now we actually have around how many regions? Let's see the correct answer. Yes, you're right. The answer actually is around 17 regions here in my country. As you can see here in the picture, the different regions in the Philippines are actually scattered all over the country. Okay, next one. Next question. In the Philippines, there are actually blank languages which are being used in the country. So how many active languages do we have? Can you still remember? Let's see the correct answer. Active languages, okay? Right, the correct answer is there are 182 active languages here in the Philippines. Now, before we actually have around 186 languages. However, only 182 languages are living, and the other four languages are already extinct in the Philippines. Now, since the Philippine archipelago is composed of different islands, it is observable, or it is quite obvious or pretty obvious that we have different languages since the islands are quite far from each other. Now, in the next lectures that I'm going to tell you, I will be talking about the different languages that we use in different regions and in different places, which are accepted in those areas. Okay. Next one. The next question is, the Philippines was colonized by these countries, namely, which ones? Spain, USA, and Japan. Yes, okay. These countries actually stayed in the Philippines for a particular period of time, and these three countries will surely, actually not will, surely influence our education system here in the country. The Spain stayed specifically for 333 years, from 1565 to 1898. Obviously, they actually influenced the Filipinos to be religious and God-fearing people. Secondly, the USA colonized the Philippines from 1898 to 1946. That is around 48 years. And for Americans, they actually influenced the Filipinos by, of course, teaching their language, the English language. Okay, that's the reason why we actually have two official languages in the country, which is Filipino and English. And the third one, the Japanese forces occupied the Philippines shortly from 1940 to 1944. Now, these three countries contributed actually to the reforms and changes that happened to the curriculum and education system of the Philippines. Okay, this one, okay, I already showed you the answer because I would like to tell you that Tagalog is not the national language of the Philippines. So whenever somebody asks a certain person, what is the national language of the Philippines? They always say it's Tagalog. Well, actually, no. According to my Filipino instructor And not only her, based on studies, is actually not Tagalog, but it is Filipino and English. So the difference of Filipino and English, the Filipino and Tagalog is very different because Filipino is a combination of Tagalog and other languages in the country. And obviously, as I have mentioned earlier, English is taught in the schools throughout the Philippines and is one of the official languages of education and business in my country. So what does that mean? It means that in all of our official documents, including diploma, birth certificate, even some of our IDs, is actually both translated in English and Filipino. Even our passports, by the way. Now, the Philippines has 8 major languages. That is actually true. So we have these 8 major languages that we actually use in speaking and communicating, and most specifically, the language that we use, our mother tongue that we use in teaching kindergarten until grade 3. So I hope these few overview or few information that you have learned about the Philippines are very useful before you come here or whenever you meet a Filipino in your country, or just in case you're going to teach some Filipino students in the future. Okay, so now let's talk about some Filipino traits and characteristics. This is very interesting because I know that you can relate with these characteristics of Filipinos since you also have these characteristics as a person, of course. So in your country, you can also find this kind of people around you for sure. Now, first, okay, so as you can see, look at the picture below. You know your Filipino when? Okay, so they have a certain kind of attitude or characteristic, and you will certainly know them because of that certain characteristic. Well, I cannot say that we are perfect, okay, but we have this kind of great characteristic and qualities that every one of us should be actually proud of. Now, many of our core values from our ancestors remain intact and are still being honored until today. So, the first one that the Filipinos are known for is being hospitable. It is actually one of the most famous qualities of the Filipinos. And based on the experiences of some foreigners who came here, they actually find themselves falling in love for the Filipinos' hospitality. Why? Because it's a different kind of values which already existed thousands of years ago. Now you can see here from these two pictures, even if they are foreigners, they are still being, in other words, even if we do not know them, the point is we still invite them, celebrate with them, and then let them try to taste our own food, even if we don't have a very close relationship with each other. Filipinos try to invite the visitors, sit down, and let them taste the Filipino foods that we actually have around to make sure that they are having a great time during their visit. Second one, okay, another characteristic of Filipinos that is actually known is being respectful. Now, looking at these two pictures, you can see a child, okay, holding the hand, putting the hand of the elderly on his or her forehead here, right? We actually call that one as mano po. So it's a kind of like a respect to the elderly, and it's actually not just observed not only from the younger ones, but also from the adults. The children in the Philippines respect the elders by saying po and opo, which means yes, when answering their elders. Children or young adults also show respect by putting their elder's hand on their forehead. So even we sometimes combine English and po, like thank you po. Okay, so just to say how much we respect the person that we are talking to. Okay. Now, Filipinos are also known as being family oriented. Filipinos is actually one of the greatest, family for us is one of the greatest asset. Okay, and we believe that it is the wealth they can never change to anything, including money. Basically, we believe that our family members are there at all times and they are emotionally attached to us even after we already got married or even after we are already separated from our parents. Actually, many would think that Filipino are economically dependent on their mothers as they tend to give their children to the custody of their parents. Well, for some reason it really is, but as a respected tradition, attachment to family is absolutely a Philippine culture, even after they got married. Okay. It does not mean that the children are, of course, incapable to live independently, but it's just a kind of like a way of showing how much we love our parents. Now, as you can see, in our case, it's actually a part of our culture to be this one obligatory family responsibility. Filipinos are totally mindful that they have to help their younger brothers and sisters, and parents, grandparents, and even aunts and uncles or relatives in times of poverty. Actually, Filipinos are actually known for helping their younger siblings. For instance, after graduating university, and after while they are working, now that they graduate and are working, it's their responsibility also to help their younger siblings and this younger sibling to the other younger sibling. So it's actually the kind of obligation or responsibility that we have for our family. Okay, so the I would like to read this one. The love in our family flows strong and deep, leaving us memories to treasure and keep. That is how family oriented or family centered Filipinos are. Next one, we got this one from the Spaniards, as I have mentioned earlier. Filipinos are known to be religious and God fearing. Filipinos actually value their family so much that they tend to be so intact. They go to church all together, they pray together because their religion is important, making God as the center of their lives. So, though Filipinos actually belong to different religious groups, they actually all have God as a supreme being, as the center of their life. Filipino families sometimes go to church or pray together with their family. So it's actually still connected to being family oriented or family centered um, behavior or characteristic of the Filipinos. Okay. Filipinos are also known to be generous and helpful. Right, I totally agree with that. This is actually observed when one person has nothing and yet they tend to share what they really have in them. Now, during special occasions such as birthdays or fiestas, a celebration when people from other places visit your place to celebrate with you, there are actually usually many foods on the table, and usually we generously share this food with the other people. And another way on how we also show our being generous and helpful is usually during typhoons. Since our country is in the Pacific area, a lot of typhoons, more than 20 typhoons usually pass by every year. Therefore, the areas where typhoons usually pass by or were hit, usually they lost their houses, they lost their work, they lost their jobs, they lose many things. And we can actually see how Filipinos help each other by means of donating what they have to the people who are actually in need. Okay, another thing that Filipinos are known for is that they are known as someone who is hard working. Okay, to the fact that they are very much willing to work several times to almost whole day just to feed their families. Also, that's how Filipinos are. Filipinos always try to find a way to earn for a living, like putting up a small business, being an entrepreneur, so that they can earn enough money for their family. They try to sell food, okay, or other items for the convenience, of course, of their neighbors as well. And aside from that example, Filipinos, also known as overseas Filipino workers, those who are working in other countries, they are well known as hardworking because compared with their colleagues, they are sometimes they work more than the others. I think because of our culture. Okay, that's the reason why sometimes they have or are being envied. I'm not sure because this was based on an experience by my friend. Actually, the more he works hard, the more that his colleagues actually say something about him in a negative way. I hope, okay, I hope that will stop. Next one is about Filipinos being known as loving and caring. Now, as a Filipino, it is actually a part of us to be caring and loving, especially with our loved ones, of course. Now, we care for them more than we care for our own selves. We even try to sacrifice everything that we have just to provide for actually their needs. Now, we are actually not the type of person who are very vocal when it comes to telling our parents how much we love them, but we show them by our actions in our own little ways. We usually do not tell them how much we care about them, how much we love them, but we always see to it that they can feel how much we love our parents, siblings, and people who actually love us too. Next one. Okay. I would just like to emphasize this one too. For Filipinos, problem of one is the problem of all. Absolutely. It is actually an advantage among Filipinos to stay attached to families and relatives. Families usually celebrate together as much as they share together the problem of a family member. Not only that, if there is a problem in the family, all the members of the family would try to find a way to solve the problem of one member of the family, even if that member is your cousin. So, for instance, one of your cousins badly need money so that he can go to school, or most of the family members try to chip in or give some money so that he or she or they can help that family member. Though it is actually not a mandatory thing to help the needy, but we believe that if we are very selfish, it will come back to us. And the reason why we also help them is because anyway, they also help us in return. So that's actually our own belief. Next one. Filipinos are also very known to be very optimistic despite the situation that we have. So as you can see, even if they are flooded in their area, they still smile in their very difficult situation. So even if we actually have a lot of typhoons, a lot of calamities in the country, Filipinos still try to remain positive about their situation. Whatever problems come their way, they always try to greet their visitors with a smile on their faces, and they always say, "It's actually okay." So, with our very optimistic attitude, we always think that we can always overcome the situation we are in. Okay, Filipinos are also known to be resourceful. Well, Filipinos, there are actually many Filipino inventors too. We are actually known also to be talented and highly creative. Why? Because we can actually do anything out of anything. Okay. So we are known to be very resourceful. We try to solve problems at a snap of a finger. And actually, thanks to our being resourcefulness, and of course, to our nature. We actually have a lot of resources too in our nature that we can use. That's actually what makes us very resourceful, especially if we don't have the technology around us. Okay. Now, Filipinos are also known to be grateful. We always say thank you whenever we are helped in return. Locals also try to give presents to tourists to thank them for taking their time, of course, to visit their religion. It's actually a part of our culture. We always say thank you, salamat po, thank you po, like that in our situations. Okay. And last but not least, Filipinos are known to be honest. I'm not sure, but have you ever heard about the honesty store? The honesty store is a kind of a store. There's actually nobody in there. There's no technology. There are different kinds of products, and what you need to do is after buying something, you get it and put the payment back into a certain box where they put the money. And if you have a change, you can get the change. So we actually have that kind of honesty store, and they found out that if there is an honesty store, the more that people actually give, not the exact amount of money, but they give more actually than what is the compared to the real price of the product. At the same time, there are actually also many well-known taxi drivers, security guards, just common people who always return money or gadgets or something very expensive, okay, which is not theirs, and they always return it to the owner. Okay, now these are just some of the common characteristics of Filipinos. Now, since we are living in a vibrant, multicultural country, it is actually great that you can understand our culture other than your own. The main thing to remember is that everyone, no matter what our cultural background is, everyone has their own unique opinions, of course, their habits, and of course, their way of life. The sooner you accept that everyone is different, the easier it becomes to understand and, of course, embrace the different cultural differences. So that's it. I hope you learned many things about the Filipinos and, of course, our own culture.